Wolfie. I hope y'all had fun playing the game. So when y'all get in here, speak up. Sorry about the crash. Hey, Malloy. The system crashed. It wasn't on my side. It was on the service that does the games. It was on their side. So I had to just like get out of it and restart the game. So anyway, sorry about that. So how have you been, Malloy? You had a good day? I hope so. So I know Wolf Kinder and Melissa Jane and Abyss, they were our top people. Valhalla was doing really good until it crashed and he didn't make it back. So Valhalla would have done really well if we hadn't restarted it. But anyway, I'm glad you had a good day, Malloy. And so anyway, I'll wait a little bit before we start and bring my girl Wolfie in. So the game was all about space. And tonight we're going to talk about the hollow moon theory. You're welcome, Malloy. So, Malloy, have you ever heard about the hollow moon theory? Do you know anything about that? I hadn't heard anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. So I just learned a lot. I learned a whole lot about the hollow moon theory. So anyway, I had to move it from 8:45 to 9. So I do apologize for all of that. That's not what we're typically going to do, but tonight we had to do that. You don't think you know anything about it? I knew nothing about it, but it's actually really cool. I mean, seriously, it's really cool. Hello, Melissa. Hello. Melissa, have you heard do you know anything about the hollow moon theory? Have you heard anything about that? I didn't know anything. But now, Wolfkinder, Wolfie as I call her, she knew and she thought it was super cool. So I thought, okay, this will be a cool thing to talk about. I hope you're having a good day at work, Melissa. Grandma, you know nothing about it. I didn't either. So anyway, so I am going to go ahead and I am going to bring in, my girl, my spirit animal, Wolfie. Here she comes. Hello, Wolfie.
Hello, how are you?
I am wonderful. I'm so glad you're here to talk about this craziness with me.
I love those wolves. Like I almost start crying when I see them. That's so beautiful.
I love it. I enjoyed doing that for you. It took me a while. I had to find the right wolves. I had to find the right music. I was like, this is her. This is her. So,
I'm trying to see the chat. Hello, Melissa Jane. Hello, Jen with no filter. Hello, Mr. Malloy.
Hey, Jen.
Did I miss anyone?
Malloy. We got Malloy.
I said Mr. Malloy.
And Jen. Yeah, Jen, we had to restart the game. So we are running not really on time. I'm 15 minutes off than what I wanted to be, but I didn't want to push it. I wasn't sure what time that game was going to end. It ended up ending at a good time, but I didn't want to rush it. So anyway, hey there. So anyway, Jen, have you ever heard about this hollow moon theory? Because I hadn't. Wolfie had.
Well, it's a geek thing, I think.
It's a geek thing. Hey, great geeks are smart, so I'm not even gonna talk anything about that. Okay, so Jen says no, she hasn't. Well, you are in for a treat. This one is a wild ride, and I'm the stuff that I learned just in the past couple of days reading and researching and listening to all of this stuff. There's no way that the science and the math. Oh, so I'm not even getting into that part, but I'm gonna let Jen says, I think we all have our own geek things. I think everybody should have a little bit of geekness in them. It's good. Lucky Chucky. Lucky Chucky, have you ever heard about the hollow moon theory? You know anything about it? Or are you going to learn with us? We're going to let Wolfie educate us. I did learn some that I'll tell you about. Hey, Clumsy. Clumsy, do you know about the hollow moon theory? She had the full moon last night, the whole full moon thing. I loved it. So, Clumsy, thank you for pulling my card. And for those of you listening on the replay and whenever, Clumsy does tarot. She is my tarot card reader. So, on Sundays, now we're doing every other Sunday, but we're going to check see when we're having it. She is going to go ahead and pull cards for us so that we get to see what is in store for us. So Clumsy said she hadn't heard about it either. Oh, she has heard it. She has heard about it. Well, I had not. So anyway, I'm gonna let Wolfie here start to educate, and I will put in a little bit, but she knows way more than me. But I did learn something. I can't say that I don't know anything now. Thank goodness. I have some wrinkles in my brain now. I feel smart. So go ahead and tell us what started all of this hollow moon stuff. Why do we even think that? It's just the moon.
I'm trying to find my date here. Okay, that's what it was. It actually started with Apollo 12, which was the second manned trip to the moon. Apollo 11, we famously know, stepped on the moon. And Apollo 12, when they were leaving the moon, they decided to let a portion of their craft fall back to the moon. They had placed seismic monitors on the moon. And when the part of the craft hit the moon, it rang. And the sound it made was such a way that there's a phrase that's been used, rang like a bell, for more than an hour. And that just had everybody flabbergasted. When we have vibrations on Earth, things, because of the density of the Earth, it only goes for so long and it slows down. But when this happened on the moon, it lasted 4 hours, really long, but it also sped up once it got below what they figured was about 40 miles. So, and that was actually the second time they did it, because they did it by accident the first time. They didn't intend that to happen, they intended to jettison that part of the craft, but they weren't thinking that was going to happen. And it was Apollo 13 that they dropped a heavier object, and that's when they got the more than 3 hours, and they could sense how the depth of how long the vibrations went. So that started this concept of, is it hollow inside?
Right.
And we can track that back to the one of the first concepts of the idea of the hollow moon actually comes from an H.G. Wells, who was a science fiction writer at the turn of the 1900s, and he wrote a book, First Men in the Moon. So that's the first modern concept where we didn't know that the moon, it was the idea that
Mm.
that it would be empty. Now, of course, that concept, once the internet gets a hold of things, it's never the same.
Nope.
So it goes from, it might be caves or it might be hollow, to it's a spaceship. And
Was
now we're
it?
now we're talking Star Wars.
Star Wars.
It's a craft and it's empty, and of course the aliens are all inside, and so that's where it's blown up into that level of people think. But there's a lot of really odd things about the moon which make you question what exactly is going on.
What is it? Yeah.
We know, one of the things that we know from science is that,
Hi, Jen.
and anybody that has seen an eclipse knows that when the moon, a solar eclipse, when the moon comes between the sun and the earth, we don't see the sun anymore. It's blacked out. And there's a ring, around the outside. And so there's a perfect sphere. The moon is the perfect size and the perfect distance from us to create an almost perfect eclipse. That's unheard of. We don't see it in our solar system, and now all the far distant stuff that we're seeing, we cannot find another moon and planet like our moon and us that does what happens here.
Yeah.
And
I think it's like 70. Is it 72 times the size of any other moon? Or they call it like satellite,
right,
for them.
right.
It's a moon, but it's 72 times. Our moon is 72 times larger than any other thing. That's just crazy big.
Yeah, it's ridiculously large.
They're not the biggest planet. I mean, if you think about, Jupiter and Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
they're bigger, but yet we've got this massive moon.
Right, right. So it's really big in relationship to the Earth.
Right.
It's the perfect size. It also has a perfectly circular orbit.
Right.
Everything else we observe has an elliptical, like an oval shape, like an egg shape. It gets a little narrow at the edges. And our moon doesn't. It goes in a circle. So a lot of this is very strange, as far as science is concerned. Now, there's other weird things about the moon, and we tried to guess how old the moon was. And there's theories about how the moon was created. Like, okay, I remember being told years ago that we were created at the same time, that all the planets in the solar system, well, we've kind of figured out that's not exactly right. And then the next theory, which I think is the most popular one, is that there was an impact. Something hit the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it broke apart. It broke us apart, the moon apart, and it created the difference between the Earth and the moon. Well, the one theory was that it hit the Pacific Ocean. And so that's why the Pacific Ocean's there, a huge chunk went to be the moon. Well, that's great. It's a great theory. But the moon rocks. are incredibly old compared to the Earth. In
Right.
fact, they're older. Some of them are older than our solar system. So, okay, that means it didn't break off of us. Another theory is that um, I'm trying to think here because I'm starting to go into different directions.
I know
It's
at one point they said something about it could have come. Um, it could have come from us, but it's even older than like we could spin and the rocks could have gone out and broken off or whatever. But it's older than our ocean.
right, right.
Core of our ocean isn't as old as the moon.
So yeah, it's pretty obvious at this point that we were never really connected. That
Right.
somehow it's a separate thing. And then there's this theory that, okay, well, maybe it was just traveling through the solar system and it got stuck here. Our Earth kind of grabbed it and pulled it in. Well, we just talked about how big it was.
Right.
It'd be nearly impossible
Our
for.
little planet. But, oh, we're going to keep you.
Right, right.
Could
the Earth,
happen.
the Earth was lonely and needed a friend.
Well, I know that like back in ancient times, they have, all the cultures have stories of history and from ancient, like in the pyramids, the tablets and things saying that there before the moon came. There's
yeah,
stuff about before the moon came. So we were here. There was civilization enough that they could record that there was no moon, and then the moon showed up.
well, that's now we're going down a whole different path, which is really kind of cool. The
Right.
Romans and the Greeks had people that lived near them in a place called Arcadia, and these people were the Procyllians, and they claimed that they were created, that they have been on Earth since before the moon.
Right.
Then you've got Bolivia in South America. Anybody who watches Ancient Aliens
Yeah.
will know the name Tiwanaku. Well, they said that the moon arrived between 11,500 years and 13,000 years ago, which that number, again, if you listen to Ancient Aliens, sounds familiar because that's the last glacial ice age, what's referred to as the Younger Dryas,
Right.
where we had the frozen period, which Younger Dryas is named for a plant. That drove me crazy for a long time till I found out why are we calling it that. It has to do with a plant that grows in cold, very cold climate. So
That's cool.
that was found. So that's why that's that. But then
Right.
there's the Zulu in Africa, who have theirs is the most interesting story because they say, and here it comes. Here we go. The Zulu in Africa say the moon is hollow, and there's an intelligent race of reptilian extraterrestrials in the moon.
Yeah, they said it was like an egg with no yolk.
Yeah.
So the center is hollow. That's what the Africans are saying.
Right.
The ancient Africans.
Right. These are
like an egg with no yolk, and these beings or humanoids or whatever you want to call them are there.
lizard people.
Yeah, the lizard. That's what they were calling.
And
Yeah.
they also continue with a story about two brothers who were like gods who put the moon in orbit. So here's all these ancient stories of. We look back in history at our ancestors and we just assume they're stupid, which is massively inappropriate. Just because they may not have had a written language, they were still keeping track of things. So they had stories. They had the stories that they passed down. And could things have gotten a little changed over time? Possibly. But, usually that was somebody whose job was taken very seriously, having to remember the stories accurately. yes, that was the other interesting thing about the Zulus. The Zulus also talked about how the time before the moon, that the earth, there was a vapor over the earth, and that there were no seasons, and the planet was, it was obviously very different.
Right.
That there were no seasons, and if they could only see the sun through this hazy mist. All right, and then once the moon came, they have a flood story. There's another
That's
flood story coming from another, which is all over the planet.
right. And, all of them were like the flood. They all talked about the flood, and we know about the flood in the Bible, and
Right.
it wiped people out, and that's why we're all kind of like connected, because a lot of them were wiped out with the floods.
And the thing is, science has been proving all of this now. We've established the fact that there was a major flood. Probably more than one, but there was at least one major flood. And so all the things that the Zulu had as their oral history, all these things that they talked about are things that we've now, proved.
Right.
That, we need the moon for our seasons. We need the moon for our tides. It would be a totally different planet if we did not have the moon, and maybe not even survivable.
Right.
So that's the other interest.
We know the moon does control the tides.
Right, right.
We're having a full moon right now. Things, the seasons, the way we rotate, everything is moon related. It's the pull, it's seasons, it's the tides, it's everything. Without that, we would probably still be covered in water.
It's a good probability. Trying to see what else we have here. We went down that path talking about.
Well, I know.
Well, there's other interesting things about the moon that we did the distance. I was thinking the rocks. We started talking about the rocks of the moon. When you look at rocks on Earth, as we go down, as we dig and go down, we find things getting older. So the stuff on the surface is newer. The stuff below it is older. Right. The moon is the opposite.
We're backwards. Or
they're yeah. It's completely backwards. So it's the older stuff is on top, and we find older new. Okay, wait. Yes, older stuff is on top. That's what I wanted to say. Right. But I think, and this is for me, the most interesting fact, and I never thought about it until it was pointed out. We see these huge craters on the moon, and they're all different sizes in terms of how round they are. Some are smaller, some are bigger. They're all the same depth.
Yeah.
So
even when there's a crater, and then there's a crater on the inside, so there's multiple craters. So you have a huge crater, and then you've got a smaller crater on the inside of that huge crater. Everything is exactly the same, and all craters. I wanted to say creators. All craters are exactly the same depth. So, like here, if something hit the ground, it's going to go to one. It's going to go deeper on some things and shallower in some. And even if it was one crater, you can still have a deeper crater inside of that crater. And on the moon, it's not like that. Oh, also, when you're talking about it being backwards, they described it being like when we mine and we're digging down and we're having to pull that inside out.
Right.
A volcano, it's going to come out. So the inside has to come out. It has to go somewhere. So for here, that's how they're saying it's like you're digging down and pulling it out so that the older stuff is on the top. But then when they're digging and they're trying to get down, like to find out what the craters are and all of that stuff, they can't go any deeper than where those craters are. They can't get any further down. So
Right.
why not? What are they hitting?
It would be like there's a huge metal shell there.
Mm-hmm.
Something that can withstand those impacts. That's fascinating. That's a fascinating concept. But there's also the chemical makeup of the dust, all the fine dust that everybody worries about when it comes to the Apollo astronauts. The dust is chemically different than all the rocks that are on the surface. So it's not like the rocks are pulverized into like a powder.
Right.
It's two different things. And the moon rocks are magnetic, but the moon has no magnetic field.
And there's things that aren't naturally made, like titanium. And
Yes.
what was it? Brass? I think it was brass. Brass and titanium, I think is what it was.
It was.
Is it brass?
We're all over the place here. My notes are. I'm like, where did I write that?
I think it was brass, titanium, and there's something else.
There's titanium, chromium, and zirconium, which are all, we have to make them. Those aren't naturally occurring on Earth.
Right.
But they're very abundant on the moon. It's not just, oh, look, we found some. There's a decent amount. And they're the hardest metals.
How did it get there?
Right. Right.
If it's not a natural thing and you have to make it, how did that get there?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they also just happen to be very resistant to corrosion. So, which would mean you could build something that would last a really, really long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all these little things when you start to add them up.
It makes you go,
Right, right. Oh, there was also uranium and neptunium, which are radioactive, and they're the ones that don't occur in nature, but they're there.
But they're there, right?
We have to.
Like there's a lot of things that shouldn't be there that are there.
It's really kind of amazing.
Or one thing, they've also found structures.
Yes. There was a technician whose name, by the way, was Wolf. That stuck with me.
Related?
No.
He's not as good as you, though.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We don't know him. He might be. I'll give him that. Sergeant Carl Wolf was an Air Force tech who was working on images that came from lunar satellites. And they found these images that looked like a base on the moon. And he was so excited about this. And he was waiting for it to show up on the news. Like, he's like, wow, we found these things. This is so cool. It never showed up. So he confirmed it, and another technician who was working on those same images also confirmed those images exist. So, or at least they did.
Yeah. Sputnik saw it. Stuff. They have pictures. They saw it, and they reported back. They're like, okay, this is what we saw, and we just kind of like blew it off. Like, yeah, right, okay, it could be shadows, it could be whatever,
right.
And then later on, so in 2006, there were two British men, and their names were Knight and Butler.
Okay.
And they published the book "Who Built the Moon,"
Mm.
They said that it was huge, it was ultra light, and they wanted to know, how was it brought here? Was it brought here? Because how was it? How was it like that? And they said that when they had these pictures again in 2006 that was going back to like what everybody was saying, what Sputnik had said originally. They said, you know, they're like the pyramids, and they're taller than any building on Earth. They're these massive things, and yet, you know, our government's going, nah, it doesn't exist. It's a shadow.
Right.
Now they have proof that no, there are these structures, and there's quite a bit. And they said they're in such a shape. I can't think of what I'm trying to say, but that they're like the pyramids, how the pyramids line up and the sun will hit it, and they connect. So all of the angles connect, which is really odd. So that's how, you know, they say that about the pyramids, that they were placed in a certain way that the sun hits it and it shines, it makes a direct line and all of those things. So they say that with the pyramids that we can study and we can see. And they're saying that that's the same way with these structures on the moon.
Well,
so you think, okay, so did the same beings do that and then come here and teach us? Is that maybe like what we were talking about with the moon landing? Is that why we forget? You know, did these beings help us, and then now we don't know because we don't have them to help us with these things? Because the pyramids are such a mystery on how they, you know, how we formed them. But then to see these same types, it's not a pyramid, but they're two
right.
pyramid type buildings. We don't know how they got there.
Right.
And they're doing the same thing that the pyramids are doing. So it makes you kind of go, well, why are they there? How did they get there? Who put them?
Right.
They're not natural, especially when you look at all the craters. So our moon has just got craters all over it. But then you've got these very large, tall, you know, I want to say phallic type, you know,
Right.
straight up. How did they get there, and why are they still there when everything's like hitting the moon to make these big craters?
Well, and you would think, I've thought about the fact that now we've got the Chinese they've gone they've actually traveled around the moon. They've been behind the moon, what we often call the dark side, but the far side. The Indians sent, India sent something. I don't know if it got there yet or if it's on its way. So we're not the only ones. So if the Chinese come back with him, they actually sent something that landed and collected soil and came back. So they sent something that was a retrieval. So you would think that, or I would think that if these other nations are now suddenly seeing things that we already knew about, somebody's got to come forward and go, here's the deal. This is what's going on up there. I mean, when you think about it, and this is another fact that just is a very strange thing. If you watch the first Apollo crew, the Apollo 11 with Neil Armstrong, when they're doing their press conference and they're sitting in front of all these people, you would think, okay, these are the first humans that stepped foot on soil that's not of Earth. And what they did, going there and coming back, you would think, okay, wow, I'm home now. This should be an exciting thing. And they look depressed. They look sad, frightened,
scared. They're kind of like, they almost look like they're worried. Okay, if I say something or I can't say something, I'm going to get in trouble. They don't want to be there. They would be so excited. Oh, we saw this and this is what happened. And it was the most wonderful experience. And every single one of them at that table looked like they were just miserable.
It's really, you have to question it. You have to question, why do they look again so miserable? It can't just be, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to tell some secret.
Right.
They look really down. It's a very strange thing. And then, well, we've got hundreds of years of sightings of lights on the moon. That over 100 years, 6 astronomers over 100 years documented mists in one specific crater named Plato.
Mm-hmm.
In March 1971, water vapor appeared and lasted for 14 hours, 100 square miles of water vapor that we watched. If you look,
one of them glows blue, doesn't it? Isn't it blue?
There's one called the Blue Gem that is in, that's a different one. That is every couple years we see the same light. It's a blue light in the Aristarchus crater. In 1992, they labeled it the Blue Gem, and there was actually speculation that it was a fusion generator. So, and then they want to tell us, oh, when we see these lights, which are documented, they're just meteors hitting the moon, and it's just creating this like spark, and that's what the lights are.
I did get what they say. Why does the moon flash? And it's that researchers, I'm just going to read what it says. Researchers have also proposed, based on observation, that some of the moon's craters emit radioactive radon gas. We're also learning that the moon undergoes seismic activities as it shrinks, and perhaps that these tectonic events cause the visual flashes. So that's what they say, that it's radon gas. But I've never heard any of the astronauts say that as they were there, that, and they were digging or they were doing any of that, that there was a gas.
Right.
I don't remember hearing anything like that.
Or even just orbiting, even not being on the surface.
Right. I've never heard where any of them said that that our moon was emitting gas. You hear about all the other planets, about there's this gas and stuff like that, but I've never heard anybody say anything about that, about the moon.
Right.
They say that these flashes are caused by the moon emitting this gas. I don't know.
It just
another one of those things that make you go,
Right.
There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that with the moon. That's just, we take it for granted. We see it. It's a constant source in our life. But there's all these little things that when you add them up, you go, okay, that's odd, and that's odd, and that's odd. And the big question, the biggest question, why didn't we go back? What stopped us from going back?
Well, on the last one that we did about Is It Faked, we talked about money, that it was very costly.
Right.
We also talked about politics and how our government decided that they needed to put those resources elsewhere.
Right.
There are a lot of reasons that they say, but also our government doesn't tell us everything.
There is that.
And at the end of the day, we have all of these astronauts who finally speak up and have said that they see things, they have seen things like is it Armstrong said that when at one point they went 2 minutes, they were dark for 2 minutes. And
Right.
he literally turned off. He turned off and went to the medic channel so that it wasn't broadcast. And during that 2 minutes, you didn't hear, but he has actually come out to say what he actually said. And I did write that down exactly what he said.
Okay.
So no, Armstrong, he made a big speech, and he said that that there's truth's unexpected layers, and so he was kind of talking cryptically. It was Buzz says he admitted that he switched off and switched to the medic line for 2 minutes, and then this is what he said. There are other spacecraft here, sir, lined up on the other side of the crater. Those babies are huge, enormous. They're watching us. That is something. And this is him saying that. This isn't, he did this many years later. He went into seclusion. He stayed away from everybody. There was a time when that one guy was following him around and he was just being harassed. So he just
he hit the guy.
Right. So after he said they're watching us, he said we'll never know. Oh, I said we'll never know why they weren't excited when they got back.
Right.
Because, they've gone and they've seen these things and now they come back. But then when he says something like that there's these huge, enormous spacecrafts on the other side of the crater and they're watching us. And then they're having to go around and they're doing all these things and they're on camera and we're watching them, but yet they can't say anything. And then they get home and they can't say anything. And our government is probably saying, you better not say anything, because you'll create this mass, this mass hysteria that there's these things on the moon. I also I've got quotes from other astronauts. So Scott Carpenter, who was on the orbiter Mercury Atlas 7, he said, at no time when the astronauts were in space were they alone. There was a constant surveillance by UFOs. That's a quote from him.
Wow.
Then Buzz Aldrin says, there's a monolith on the moon of Mars. When people find out about that, they'll say, who put that there? Then you have the first Japanese American in space, and his name was Ellison, and I will screw his name up, Onizuka or something like that. I know I said that wrong. He said that he witnessed small, strange-looking creatures, humanoid in shape. They did not look of this earthly origin. And that's what he said. Now, these are astronauts. Then the sixth person to walk on the moon was Edgar. My mouth doesn't work.
Edgar Mitchell?
Yes. He admitted, yes, there has been ET visitation and may continue to be. There's a lot of evidence that points to a clandestine group. So that's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 astronauts who have said that there's something, that they've seen something, but they didn't come out and say it right away. They waited until, it's kind of safe for them to speak, but they spoke up. So that makes you wonder, okay, so if you've got other countries, you've got the Soviets, you've got, Chinese, you've got India, you got all these, Japan, everybody's up there. and they're noticing things, and they've got, pictures of things. We've got pictures of structures on the moon. I wish I had been able to get some of that. It's out there. Y'all can Google it. There's tons. But our governments don't want to say anything. And it makes you wonder why. Why are they lying? Why do they, when they say, they make up things like there's a hum, there was reports that they heard this eerie sound, and I can't remember who it was that said that they were out there and they heard this eerie sound coming from the moon. And so then they're like, oh, well, it's because of the radioactive, vibration, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, but the moon doesn't have that, because they're comparing it to what's on the inside of the Saturn rings. And we don't have that. So if we don't have that, then, it was Apollo 10 said there was eerie sounds that was coming from inside the moon. And they compared it to the Saturn rings. So they're saying radio waves reacting to the magnetic field, but the moon doesn't have a magnetic field.
Right.
So why are they lying, saying that it's from the magnetic field? What would the point be? We're not stupid. So the thing is, why lie? Why try and cover up? I understand the mass hysteria thing. I get all that. But what's the point in covering it up or saying something like it's the magnetic field when we know that there's no magnetic field? Or that's not a real structure. It's not a structure. But then other countries are going, well, we have these photos. There was also somebody who I think it was more recent, who actually put it in color. So all of our pictures are like grainy and all of that. But then you look at Mars and they're clear.
They're changing they're actually altering the colors that was established.
Right. So when they colorized these photos and stuff, it makes you able to see all these structures and stuff better. So, and that's been more recent that people are starting to do that. But I don't know, Wolfie.
Edgar Mitchell, the reason I knew Edgar Mitchell's name is because he actually he wrote a book and he started an organization that explored psychic abilities. He created an organization called the Noetic Society, Noetic. There was another astronaut, and I can't think of another. There was another one. They had profound experiences being off planet, and having things happen that they couldn't actually talk about. It's curious. The whole thing is just, again, it's more hidden information.
Yeah, it was 1994 that the photos were colorized.
Okay.
And Apollo 17 got photos of the pyramid type things.
Okay.
They had all these things. The subject was just dropped. They have them. They were published by New York Post and LA Times. It was published, but they just dropped it. They acted like nothing, like it didn't happen. Like, oh, they didn't publish those pictures. There was no. They just dropped it.
I know there's a lot of stuff. It can be really hard to discern where the facts are and how much stuff has continued to be made up now, especially with AI, and anybody can create images. So it's going to be increasingly more difficult to say, oh, that's a real picture. That's not a real picture.
No.
I mean, everybody on their home devices can now create things. So
Photoshop. Yeah.
right. Oh,
Photoshop stuff.
right, right. And so it's going to get increasingly more difficult to really figure out where the accurate stuff is, and what's the stuff that's just made up.
Yep.
But it's as it's unfortunate, but as these men get older and they start reaching the end of their life, a lot of them just reach a point where they say, well, no one can bother me, no one can hurt me now. Now I can tell the stories, right?
I can
The deathbed confession kind of thing,
right?
Where they can just finally release all the information they've been carrying with them for so long. It's
well, there's things that aren't released either. Like you were talking about the what was the bell? The chapel. The chapel.
That's right. Chapel Bell, the Apollo 17 still has a classified experiment that was called the Chapel Bell experiment, and we still have no idea. That's oddly coincidental.
Yeah, that they named it that.
That's
the ringing. I'm talking, and I did hear they're like, well, it wasn't really that it was ringing like a bell.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that it was vibrating, and the vibration was vibrating like a bell would vibrate.
Right.
But that's not what they originally said. That's what they're saying now. But that's not originally what they said. It sounded like a bell. It rang from 40 minutes to an hour the first time. The second time, that was when they put the lunar module into it. Then the second time they did it, they put like 11 tons. What was it? It was like 11. It was 11 tons of dynamite 100 miles away from the crash site. It rang for 3 hours. So, I mean, why not just say, okay, something's weird up there. We don't know what it is.
Right.
It's doing this. Instead, they have it all classified. So, I don't know.
Let's put it this way. If there is somebody up there and they are living inside this thing and we're dropping stuff on them and making things ring like a bell, it's no wonder we didn't go back.
You're making me mad. Don't do that. That's not nice. Don't be banging on my door and running away. It's ring and run.
Hey, you, ding dong dash. Woo!
Don't do that. Don't do that. If you're going to make them mad, if they're not working and minding their own business, leave them alone.
That's why we didn't go back, because the neighbors said, get off my lawn.
That's right.
I think when I think about what we didn't do, what we were going to do, Wernher von Braun suggested that we nuke it. It actually came up as an idea that they wanted to send a nuclear device at the moon. Let's just see what this does.
Let's practice on the moon. Let's see if it melts the inside. Let's see if we can get more than the depth of all the other craters.
Even
that's good either.
Even if it, for whatever reason, didn't really damage the moon, what if it shoved it out of orbit?
Oh yeah.
What if it
and we all die?
It just it boggles the mind sometimes.
We need the moon. I don't care if it's a spaceship or if it's hollow or what's inside. I don't care. They're just leave the neighbors alone.
Leave the neighbors alone.
Mind your own business. They're not bothering us that I know of. They haven't visited my house anyway. They haven't been bothering my house, so I'm okay with it. Just leave the neighbors alone and let them be. Because if you make them angry, that's not going to work out well for anybody.
No, it can't possibly.
No, I can't say that I think it's hollow or that it's a spaceship or I can't. My answer is for me, I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of things that say, you know, you can make your brain go in all different ways and you can think, that's why are we doing that? And why is the government not doing this? And what is on the other side of the moon? And why does it do this? And why did it just come out? It hasn't been here forever. And what brought it here? And I don't know. I can't say. And nobody's telling me. And, I don't know.
I think
Or it might not. I don't know.
that's one of the fascinating things to me is that the fact that we have these ancient cultures who say it wasn't always here. Well, that fascinates me.
That fascinates me too.
The fact that all of the craters are the same depth, that fascinates me.
Yeah.
So what's the layer that keeps things from going any deeper? And as far as it being hot,
they were trying. They were actually trying to get deeper. Couldn't. Why?
Right. That's fascinating. There's something to that.
The metals that aren't are not natural. How is it that they're there?
Right. If we have to physically create them, but yet they're natural up there. Like, yeah, that's a fascinating fact.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings up the question, what are we really going to find if we go to other planets?
Mm-hmm.
If our next door neighbor here, the moon, has these things on it, what are we going to find in other places? But again, that's fascinating. The elements, the crater. I believe I would tend to side on the fact that maybe it's not exactly hollow, but that there's like cave systems or lava systems or something like that where it's not.
Would make sense. That would explain the lights, the gas, lava. That would explain how the inside Earth is coming out. I mean, that would explain, but it's all over. It's not just in one area.
Right.
We've never seen like a volcanic eruption on the moon. I mean, we can see the moon. We can see from here now. We've got these, massively high-powered telescopes that we watch. So, we see these things, these lights, this stuff, but,
Well, when we think of eruptions, we think of volcanoes here on Earth, which are red lava that flows out and,
that could be the blue light that we see.
It could be gas. It could be more so gas than it is like an actual liquid. That whatever's going on, and just not volcanic in the same sense that we are, because it doesn't have the layer. But I would say there's. Plus, science tells because of the calculations and numbers that I'll never understand. We know that it's not as dense as the Earth. So,
like he was saying, it's ultra light. It's huge, but it's ultra light. So, for such a massive object to be so light is odd.
Right. It seems to defy all of the logic that when they look at it scientifically and say, the age of the rocks. The age of the rocks are backwards. Just so many things about it. It's this odd anomaly right there. But no, is it a spaceship? I don't buy that.
I don't think so.
There's just real oddness to it.
Yeah.
So
little creatures in there. They're watching us. That's one of the things that I saw when they were talking about the eclipse. So when there's an eclipse, if you see it from space, it looks like an eye. It looks like you have the flare of the sun going out, and then you have the moon in the middle, and it looks like an eye looking at you. It's creepy.
Ooh.
You can go online and look at that. It's super creepy. I wish I could have all that stuff, but it was
That's cool.
And there was one thing. It's called it's called The Moon is Artificial and I Can Prove It.
Okay.
In the observatory. That is a really, really good video to look at. It's by Universe Inside You. So that's the name of the site. But the video is called The Moon is Artificial and I Can Prove It, Alien Observatory. And that video is super cool. I was watching it going, oh wow. And it shows the pictures of the eye, and it goes really into depth. So I enjoyed watching that. I was like, okay. And I know you watched the Y-Files, which we love.
Yes.
And he had a lot of really good information and stuff about that too.
Yeah, I recommend him to everybody. He does a really great job. Whatever the topic is, he looks at the common ideas and he breaks it down, and he doesn't include everything he can find, obviously, because he wants to keep his shows a little short. But then at the end, he does a really balanced analysis of the things that he's found, and he's entertaining. He's goofy, you know.
Yeah, I like Hecklefish.
And a talking fish. You can't go wrong with a talking fish.
With teeth. Anyway, well, I have enjoyed looking at this hollow moon theory. I had no clue. I hadn't heard about anything about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, not that I wanted to stay on the moon thing, but I was like, okay, wait a minute. I came across it when we were looking at, thinking about doing the moon landing, whether it's fact or faked, and it came across this, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, we need to talk about it. So anyway, I am going to put a poll in the community tab of what to talk about next. So everybody needs to check that out and see, so you can vote on what we're going to talk about next. So anyway, well, thank you so much. Well,
thank you. I had a good time.
I know. I'm so glad you knew about this and kind of supported this craziness. That I was like, oh, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Wolfie was excited. Yes.
Yeah. Wolves and the moon, we kind of go together.
You kind of do. I'm glad you do. So we're not going to talk about the moon next time. We'll talk about something different, because I don't want to be the moon person.
That's good. I hear you.
Even though there's so much, we'll come back to the moon because there's plenty to talk about. But we'll talk about something next time.
Okay.
Anyway, so I want to thank everybody for watching, and make sure that you click the like button, subscribe if you haven't. And if you are part of the replay crew, make sure that you make a comment. I would appreciate it. I want to know, what do you think? Do you believe that it's an alien spaceship? Do you think it's hollow? Is it made of cheese? I don't know. I want to know what y'all think. Anyway, again, Wolfie, I appreciate you coming. And
thank you.
I will see y'all later. Bye.